All right. So number one, thank you all for joining us. My name is Mike Willman for the purposes of the recording. And it is Friday, May 3rd at a few minutes past noon. And this is an onboarding session for the trustees of the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey, Inc. With us is our co-chair, Greg Carlisle, TD Bank, our secretary, Marianne Ragone, and board members, Mark Morgan, Gabriella Santaferraro, Julie Fink, Mark Serace, Nate Wright, and Executive Director Nicole Nance has just joined us. So, as I was saying before we started in earnest, I have a fairly predictable template of items to cover in terms of this onboarding session. But I want to begin by making sure that I understand what questions or topics or issues or concerns or suggestions you all have, so we get to those and deal with the normal course of events. So I'll just run down the list. Greg, I know you're preoccupied with some TD business, but is there anything in particular on your mind for today? Greg?
No, sorry. No, just looking forward to obviously going through this. You know, I'm newer, obviously, what are we in? We're in May already. So I'm newer to the organization, about 6 months. So this is going to be helpful for me. And, you know, I've talked to obviously some of us that are on the call that are newer to the organization too. And I think it's going to be helpful for them. So thank you for putting it together.
Sure. Mark Morgan, anything in particular you want to make sure we cover today?
Just ready to listen.
Okay.
And learn.
Marianne.
Yes.
Anything in particular that you want to put on the table so that we don't miss it as we go?
Well, considering that I am brand new, so just good to be here and look forward to, you know, right now, great to meet everybody who's here and look forward to meeting others and just ready to learn about the center and see how I can help.
Okay. Gabriella, Gabby.
Hello. Clarity on expectations, and I think that's something that we will definitely discuss today. So
Sure.
That's it. Thank you so much.
All right. Jewel?
Yeah, I echo Gabriella's. Just like a job description, roles and responsibilities. What are the expectations of board members?
The first expectation is that you will all make a personal contribution of probably a minimum of $50,000, and after that, you know, it all sort of falls in place after that.
All right, I'm going to bow out now. You said 50,000.
No, we will.
Great meeting you all, but I'm out.
Mark Serace, anything in particular you want to get on the table?
Glad you were joking about. I was getting ready to hang up. No, I'm good. I'm excited to be part of this, and then just looking forward to learning more and being a part of this. So appreciate you having me.
Okay, Nate.
No, super excited to be here this afternoon and looking forward to learning more about the organization and the current board structure.
All right, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask Nicole if there are particular things that she would like us to cover or discuss or whatever. Nicole?
Good morning, everyone. My apologies for joining late. No, I'll just chime in as you go. I think the clarity for every board member is my top priority as well.
Okay, well, we will try to keep that in mind. So I sent you all yesterday an unforgivably long Word document. It's unforgivably long because there were some things that I thought were perhaps optional in terms of this event, but that I would like you to have. And there were some that I thought, upon reflection, someday when you have nothing else to do, and I can't imagine you ever have a day like that, you might look at and maybe it would be helpful in terms of what you do with this board or any other board. So our agenda, first of all, I've sent you over the course of the last 9 weeks, various versions of a board directory, which includes board biographies. Most of you have been nice enough to respond. In this trustee onboarding document, there is the current version of that. So if you're missing something, it asks for, and many of you are missing, your residence. we don't want to share your residence with anybody, but we do want to be able to mail you things. We hardly ever do that. So it's totally an internal piece of information. We will post the names of our board members and their biographies on the website eventually, for many reasons. One of which is you're all extraordinarily experienced and talented, and we want people to know who you are. So if you want to revise your bio, fine. A couple of you I've asked to shorten it. We're sort of shooting for between 200 and 250 words. If you're satisfied with it, fine. And if you've given us all the information, thank you very much. Next thing, the history, the services, and the impact of NPDC. I will try to synopsize. This is an organization that was started in 2006 by a woman named Becky Corbin, who has since left the area and moved on to bigger and better things. Becky had this notion that there was a role for an organization that would help other NPOs. She recruited a number of people to be with her early on, including a couple of our board members, Ira Weissman, Bob Dentino, and me. Initially, this organization was I guess, a child of Rowan University. The person who was in charge of the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, whose name now escapes me and who has since moved on to a different academic institution, was very excited about Becky's suggestion. And for several years, we met at Rowan. We had actual space at Rowan. And over time, that evolved, that changed. So now that relationship no longer exists, not because there was ever any parting of the ways, just because it came to, I don't know how to describe it. The people at Rowan changed, and therefore their priorities changed. And so it was just something that was easy to drop off their radar screen. And at that point, we did not pursue it in terms of trying to keep it on their radar screen. The reasons for any of that are probably largely irrelevant at this point. Ultimately, the organization hit upon several positionings. One, what do? We educate, we connect, and we celebrate. Educate. So if you look in your packet, you'll see that we have created 25 different curricula, modules, workshops, whatever. I think we presented all but 3 somewhere. Some of them are presented through Camden County College in a certificate program. Some of them are done for individual organizations on an ad hoc basis. So we have a committee which deals with education and technical assistance. Education is the workshops. And we are negotiating with both RCSJ and Atlantic Cape to add them to the organizations that would publicize and present these things on our behalf, or I guess act as conduits. The technical assistance, I would let Mark Morgan speak to that, because he is not only the guiding light behind the Morristown Theater Company, but he's a person who, prior to joining our board, has hosted at least 2 sessions with his board and a member of our organization to, well, Mark, why don't you give us your 60-second version of MTC's relationship with NPDC?
Wow, I didn't get my script ahead of time in the mail, Mike, so I guess I have to ad lib here, which I can do very easily as a theater person. I've known Mr. Willman for several years, and I said to him in passing at one point, hey, we have a board. I think I heard him mention about speaking to boards, and I said, we need a moderator for a board retreat. And we did that 2 years ago for the first time in February. And he did such an amazing job that we asked him back for a second time. And we just did that this past February. And it's just been wonderful to have someone from outside kind of review our organization. Mike asked for minutes, list of board members, budgets, financial statements. And so he obviously did his homework and came in prepared to have us look at ourselves with a better eye and an outside eye. So it's a wonderful opportunity that maybe every member of this organization at some point should have someone come in, whether, I don't know, Mike can get to every group that's a member of this organization, but he'd probably never do anything else. But it's been very helpful for us. I'd highly recommend it.
Exactly as I wrote it out and sent it to you ahead of time, Mark. I appreciate it. You did mention what a good-looking guy I am, but other than that, you got everything else.
And
So-
you were wonderful.
Yeah.
Jeez.
We have done sessions with individual organizations such as Mark's, where we bring 2 or 3 or 4 presenters and talk about a number of topics that they have selected, maybe board governance, maybe fundraising, whatever. And we have done the kind of retreat that Mark has described that we've done for Morristown Theater Company. So we call that technical assistance. So education and technical assistance, that is one of our non-standing committees. We celebrate by having an annual awards event. And currently we recognize individuals and organizations in 7 different categories. Nicole, what is the tentative date for our awards event this year?
September 24th.
Okay. And that will be at the Doubletree, right?
Doubletree in Mount Laurel. That's a Tuesday.
And so we recognize an NPO Executive of the Year, an Organization of the Year. We recognize a collaboration, which I believe Mark's MTC has been awarded. There's a small stipend that comes with being chosen. We have a Volunteer of the Year, we have a Board Member of the Year, and we have a Chairman's Award, which is kind of discretionary with the chair in terms of recognizing somebody or some organization that might otherwise go unrecognized, but deserves the visibility that comes with a recognition of the good work that they have done. The connecting happens in a number of ways. Most recently, beginning in April of 2022, it has been the focus of what we've called a regional nonprofit summit. So the first of those happened on April 22nd, 22nd of 2022, April 24th. I forget, sometime in April of 2022. And it happened at Rowan. And we got several hundred folks in person and also online via an application known as Hoover. And we discussed issues that we thought were relevant to the people who lead and serve NPO organizations across the region. One of the things that came out of that was, I don't want to say a mandate, but a suggestion that we do regionally more convenient versions of the same thing. So we had mini summits in every county in South Jersey in the ensuing 18 months, starting in Salem in October of 2022 and ending in Ocean in June of 2023. And after that, we then moved to the second summit. We call it Summit 2, which happened just this past March, on March 12th at Rowan. It was an interesting event for many reasons. For me, it was interesting, not just because we had 239 folks representing different organizations there, but because the night before, specifically at 11:35, Rowan decided that a concern they had had for more than a week about the temperature in the student center building where we were planning to be was compromised by some work on the heating system, and they decided that it was of sufficient concern that they didn't want to have this be there. Rowan, it was amazing. There were 50 or 60 people, it seemed, that Rowan somehow gathered up in the middle of the night and moved the event to the atrium hall, foyer, whatever, of the business building, the Rohrer Center. And it worked out amazingly well, considering it was something that was done in less than 12 hours. And the best news was not that it worked out so well, almost flawlessly, thanks to the people at Rowan, but they were so penitent about having moved us at the last minute that they gave us the facility and the food and everything for free. So every year we're going to try to pick a building they're working on, schedule it to be there, and hope that at the last minute they'll move it. And will reap the benefits of that. So out of that summit came a focus on what I'm going to call needs assessment issues analysis, which as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Wright has agreed to help us lead. So we're looking at what are called NTEEs, which stands for National Template for something. Basically, it's categories of that you do business in as an NPO. And Nate, I know you know what that stands for. So why don't you bail me out and tell me what NTE stands for?
Yeah. So national taxonomy of exempt entities.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So not template, taxonomy. Anyway, we have identified going into that summit about 16 different areas, some of them, you know, totally unsurprising and logical: housing, education, health, mental health, stuff like that. There are more than 50 categories, maybe a whole lot more than 50. But what we're trying to do is several things. We realize that what is important and what would be defined as important, say for housing in Atlantic County, which is home obviously to Atlantic City, might be different than what would be defined as housing needs in Cumberland County. So we don't want people to think that we are, you know, oversimplifying, but we do want to find out what people think are the most compelling areas, or the areas most in need. So my examples are, if we looked at all the food pantries, so we know that, for example, the Community Food Bank of South Jersey has 300 affiliate food banks across the region. If we found out there was an area that was specifically in need but did not have one, that would be a result. It's not that we're going to create a food bank, it's that we're going to identify that need might exist. That's a very specific example. Ultimately, this effort is designed to identify every not-for-profit in South Jersey. So we're creating a database which is being expressed in the form of a directory. We are paying Phoenix consultants to do that for us. And we have migrated information about 22,700 NPOs in South Jersey to that database. Those are folks who file 990s. The majority, certainly a substantial number of the folks who gravitate toward NPDC and who utilize NPDC services are small. So they don't take in more than $10,000 in gross income, and therefore don't have to file a 990, and we don't know who the hell they are. So we're in the process of trying to take all the sources of information that we can and use them to populate this database. And here's what we want to have happen. Number one, it will give us, NPDC, a way to talk to all the people that we hope to be able to interact with and serve. Number two, and this was a recognition that came from the mini summits, it will allow people in various geographies, and we'll say counties for the sake of some better term, to know who the folks are that are there. And you might say, well, of course the people in Cape May County know who the people in Cape May County are. And the reality is that when we did an event there, which was in May of 2023, we had, I don't know, Nicole, somewhere 60, 70, 80 people in the room, and they didn't know each other. And they were saying things like, oh, Marianne, where are you from? Oh, you do what? Oh, Nate, you're from Rutgers? Where's that? Just kidding, Nate. And they were delighted to be meeting one another. And we were, you know, we were also in that sort of post-COVID thing where everybody was just happy to be out meeting somebody somewhere in person. So for them to interact with one another, for us to interact with them, but ultimately and most importantly, to allow people who live in South Jersey to have an access point for information about what NPOs can offer. So if I have a middle school child who needs an after-school program for reading and I don't know where to go, I could go here. and I could find out, since I live in Camden County, what's available, since I live in Haddonfield, what's available. Somebody has a friend, a family member, who in the middle of the night has a mental health crisis of some sort, doesn't exactly know where to go, may be aware of NJ 211 or may not. But this is a place to begin the process of we are not a referral service, where we envision ourselves as an information service. So it's a place to get started. And I think it's worthwhile to have a little tangent concerning NJ 211. Some of you, most of you know that is a United Way funded effort which focuses on health and human services. It has 2,000 organizations in its database, and you call there and you talk to somebody, you get help. And we are collaborating with them on a very, I guess I would call, elaborate basis to make sure that if somebody calls us or accesses our database, that they immediately see if they're looking in the areas that NJ 211 has services to provide, that they are immediately sent to them, directed to them. And it's turning out to be a very good partnership. So NJ 211, 2,000 entities, but that represents more than 6,000 programs on, if you think about, I don't know, the Nate Wright Presbyterian Church, but it has a food pantry, it has a seniors program. You know, you get the idea that organizations have more than one program, and that doesn't mean that the person running the food pantry knows anything about what's happening in the senior program or whatever. So they have taken to focusing on programs even more so than just entities. So think about this though, they have 2,000. We know that there are 22,742 entities in South Jersey that are big enough that they had to file a 990. So there's a huge gap in terms of information. We don't want to duplicate, but we do want to collaborate, and we want to amplify. So I think that we're on the road to doing that. The idea being that ultimately we're going to serve people in South Jersey in a small way by giving them access, initial access, some kind of portal, some kind of initial information that would respond to whatever their particular need or interest is at the moment. In that same vein, our plan is at least twice between now and 2030, which is our target goal for this. I guess ultimate goal is better expressed this way. By 2030, we would like to be so in touch with what the people in South Jersey need and help to have put that in place, that when people talk about not-for-profits and how they fit into the fabric of life in South Jersey, we will be able to say, because it will be true, that this is one of the most NPO-friendly, most NPO-appreciative regions in the country. So that is pretty much where we go in terms of the kinds of programs that we have been involved in. And let me stop there.
Michael,
Yes.
okay, you're going to stop. I was going to interject, but you go ahead.
No, I'm going to stop and see if folks have a question or a comment.
Right on point. That's why we work well together. I was going to say, did you want to take a break? See if somebody has something to say.
I'm going out for lunch, guys. And you know, you all carry on and do whatever you're going to do, and good luck. So did you have a thought, Nicole, you wanted to interject?
Yes, the first thought was such good information, and I'm hoping it's shedding some light on our purpose and why we exist, and the impact. And then number two, I wanted to say it's important that some of the I guess organizational structural issues we're kind of cleaning up on. So for those, I would like to graciously ask, if you haven't responded about getting an email with NPDCSNJ.org, would you please respond to me so you can have an email with that extension? We're going to be transitioning all correspondence to that. And for those of you
as well.
So I have every confidence that this is the level of problem that we can address. Beyond this, I'm not sure, but I think we can do this. Let me go back to
Michael, I had a few questions about some of the stuff that you've already addressed, talked about. Okay. I was just curious, for your education piece of this. How are your educators selected? Are they members of this board? Are they volunteers? Do you do a RFP process to get topics and presenters? How is that determined?
The topics were create committee or, council or whatever. We talked to some of the people at Camden County College because that was our first place. And we had the good fortune of being sort of shepherded through that by the person who was president at the time, Don Borden. So we have subsequently gotten suggestions, like, for example, cybersecurity was not an initial workshop, but now is, because Bill Whelan at Ocean First Bank, who used to be on our board but is no longer, said they had a great person, and it would be, did we want to do that? So we don't turn away workshop ideas, but we do try to talk to people to see which ones will make the most sense to them. For a while, we were doing, I think, a good job of attracting people. One of the reasons for that was that Camden County College had a catalog, a printed catalog that went out to everybody in Camden County. They ceased to do that. That, plus the fact that they moved us from a professional something or other category to personal enrichment, meant that we were getting nobody to sign up because people didn't find us. So there are challenges with every aspect of what we do. That's the challenge there. The people who present are people who are on our board or who have been suggested by people on our board. And Bob Dintino and Ira Weissman, who are both on our board, have served on that committee. Bob is a member of the faculty at Rowan. I think most of you have encountered Ira at some point, who has a long history in corporate training. So I wish I could say there's some very specific process that, requires you to promise your firstborn child before you get to be a presenter or something. But really, it's a person who does social media was recommended to us by the Nonprofit Professionals of Color Collective. And we have used her for our social media, and she presents. The person who does our HR and employment law is a partner at the international employment law firm of Ogletree Deacons, and they give us money, to support sponsorship money. I'm trying to think of the folks who we have attorneys, such as Fran McElhill, who is on the cusp of retiring at Archer, but who was on our board for many years, who has done board governance for us. So
okay, so it's our network of influencers and who are connected to as an organization. And are they? I'm assuming it's all volunteer based, correct?
It is, and we did that religiously for a while, and then one of our presenters said, this is a lot of work. We should pay people. So we started to offer, and still do, a $250 stipend to a presenter. Many of our presenters are very generous and say, no, just keep it. But some, and I don't want to, gainsay them or question their reasons, are happy to have it.
Okay.
Anything else, Jewel?
And how, in terms of the data hub, when you were talking about the initiatives around that, I know your timeline is for that to be completed by 2030, I think you indicated. No?
Our timeline was to have it operational by Summit 2, and it was.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
And to have its impact be such that by 2030, people will be aware of it and be using it. And people who live in South Jersey will feel that you can't appreciate what all the NPOs here do if you don't know they exist. So we're trying to create some level of visibility and some easy way to take a first step toward donating to one, being a board member, getting some assistance in a particular area that you're concerned with, or some area you want to volunteer in. So if by 2030 we can have a level of visibility which reflects what I think is the level of credibility that most of our NPOs deserve, that's where the 2030 comes in.
Okay, and I guess that's what I wrote down in terms of, you say visibility. What are the strategies to get it out there? You know, I don't want to say marketing, but really it's, you know, connecting to schools or, you know, counties that have crisis programs, that sort of thing. So what's the strategy there, or when do you anticipate creating that strategy?
That's among the many things that would be on the table for the next 18 months. It has to be, I think we have to be satisfied that it's working well before we try to do that.
Right.
So our first goal is to identify all the organizations. Here's one of the problems. I told you, 22,700 NPOs that file 990s in South Jersey. So they have more than $10,000 in gross income. We don't know who the other ones are below that, but we know that's a sweet spot for NPDC. You want to start an NPO, or you have, you know, my example is the Mike Willman Poetry Society, which meets in my garage and has no members, and even I don't show up for the meetings, you know, but stuff like, your employer doesn't need us. We need your employer to be aware of what we do and to try to help us. So the kicker is that of those 22,700, only 700 have actually, with their 990s, filed an email address. So even though we know who they are now, we don't have an easy way to get to them. So we're enlisting volunteers to so there's the Mike Willman Poetry Society. So we have somebody go online and find that, and find out that info at Mike Willman Poetry is how we reach them. So that we can, number one, encourage them to sign up if they haven't. Number two, encourage them to look at what's there in case it isn't up to date, and be aware that we want to market that information going forward, but we're not close to that yet. Okay.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
All right. I've neglected money. I realized by looking at my notes. So for years, NPDC was basically a $20,000 a year organization. We'd take in some sponsorship money. We'd do some workshops. We'd do some events. And for several years, we were the Southern New Jersey affiliate of the IRS, along with Seton Hall University in the north part of the state, to present the workshops that they want to present to NPOs, stuff like that. We did individual and collective workshops, so like a day of sessions, and Wells Fargo was an initial sponsor of that. So Wells Fargo would say, would you go to our branch in Toms River and do whatever you want to do, because they thought there was some value for them in being perceived as a good community partner and bringing this information to the people in, you know, that locale. The summits changed that. The first summit basically brought in terms of sponsorship dollars, somewhere in the vicinity of $80,000. The second summit and the related fundraising activities pushed it past the $100,000 mark. The second summit we reduced the expenses of presenting the event, in part because Rowan gave us stuff for free, as I told you, but it includes $40,000 or more for the creation of the database and the distribution of that information in terms of a digital directory. So, and that represents ongoing expenses. For example, hosting all of that information on a private server will cost us about $4,800 a year. So there are pieces of this that we have, I think, very successfully gotten support for. TD Bank has been the presenting sponsor of everything we've done since we began. And we have had somebody from TD on our board. And now, of course, we have Greg as a co-chair. We've been really fortunate that there are some very influential individuals, and I'll just cite one. So the Holman organization and Mindy Holman personally have been very generous in supporting what we do, not just the summits, but the stuff that came before that. So the Holman connection, the TD connection provide credibility, as well as, you know, the actual dollars of support. Right now, I'd hope that our treasurer could be on this call, but our last board meeting, I think we were in the vicinity in terms of, you know, our bank account of $67,000, but there's a lot of stuff that we have to pay for out of that. Our ongoing expenses include a part-time executive director, insurance, stuff like that. All the things you would anticipate that we would pay for. We do not have a bricks and mortar headquarters. We do have 2 ways to reach us by USPS mail. So we do have a street address in Haddonfield, which is a UPS, not USPS, but a UPS box. And we've had access to a USPS box in Haddonfield, box 100, since we began. So there are, you know, different expenses, and all of that budgeting and fundraising needs stewardship, needs superintendents, but that's down the road. Next thing on my list I'm going to pass over, I put a section in that trustee onboarding document about NPO vocabulary, just in case you're not an NPO person. A little bit of history, just because it appeals to me, of the NPO process in this country. And the section that comes after that is essentially a recognition of the various steps involved. What are some of the concerns? What are the do's and don'ts? If you want to have an NPO, what do you got to do? What's this 990 thing? What's New Jersey Charities registration? How do you do that? Why do you have to do that? So there's a lot of stuff like that. And much of that comes from the Pro Bono Partnership, which is another organization that we've been able to effectively collaborate with. They have great information, and we just tried to turn it around and get it out to people. There is a section in there on resources. So URLs, websites that you can go to answer some questions in the more general sense. There's a bibliography. So I teach this stuff. And so there are, I think, 9 different books that I, you know, suggested you might want to take a look at. That's entirely up to you. In New Jersey, there are many mandatory notices that NPOs have to post every year. Pro Bono Partnership is very good about letting us all know what they are. I just put in one batch so you can see the kinds of things that little, I don't want to call them nitpicky, but stuff, if you don't do it, it's, you know, it's not stuff you want to ignore. One of our biggest concerns is the state of our bylaws. So we had bylaws when we were formed. We went from being initially a member organization, and the idea was that Rome was going to provide incubator space for any NPO that wanted it, who wanted to be a part of NPDCSNJ. Only a couple did that, and ultimately we just stopped being in the bricks and mortar space business. You got bricks, mortar, you got an office, you know, a carrel, a telephone, so on. And then we decided to go to being a non-member organization, meaning we didn't have people who paid money and therefore were sort of in the stead of shareholders and could expect some ability to have a say about what was going on. And then we went back to a member organization, and I'm not going to bore you with why all that happened. And I would say it was a very, very, very modest success. So in 2021, I believe, we went back to being a non-member organization. In other words, an organization run by its trustees and whatever, you know, paid staff the trustees chose to involve. And I think everybody who was a part of all that would agree that we did a bad job of having a clean set of bylaws. So I gave you in your packet one of the last iterations of an attempt to clean it up, which I was not responsible for, and some notes from a immediate past chair about what some of the more recent changes might have been, but were never articulated in the context of, okay, change Article 4, Section 3 to read Julie, not Mike, kind of thing. So that's one of the things that needs to be done, and I think we can do it effectively. In that same vein, we have not asked all of you for a conflict of interest statement. We will, meaning you'll agree that, and just to make it clear, conflict of interests are not forbidden. What's forbidden is to not acknowledge them. So let's say Julie had a catering business and was willing to, provide us an excellent product at a very agreeable price. Somebody said, well, wait a minute, she's on your board, she can't do that. No, she can do it as long as we all know that she's on our board and we all voted and said yes. So we have a conflict of interest statement that we will get to you in the same vein as we will clean up the bylaws. The next thing that's on my list is committees. We have two kinds. Every organization has some standing committees. So governance, probably some finance or budget committee, probably a fundraising or development committee. Julie mentioned marketing, so those kinds of things. And then there are the ad hoc or event or whatever committees. And in our case, there's the summit planning group, which will then spawn this needs assessment group. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, which Nate has agreed to help us on. We have the annual awards event, which needs superintending. And in this sense, we need sponsorships, but we also need to know that there's somebody who we should be considering for recognition. Some people are reluctant to nominate themselves or say, hey, we're doing a really good job over here. It's easy to say our organization is doing a good job, but it's very hard to get people to say, hey, I'm the CEO of this organization and I'm doing a really good job. So we have to push people to identify for us those organizations that are worthy of recognition. Mark and MTC, Morristown Theater Company, were recognized, and I don't remember what year it was, Mark, but it was relatively recently, for the best collaborative effort. So Mark, why don't you got 30 seconds to explain what it was that came to our attention that we wanted to recognize.
Well, and I wasn't shy about nominating us for it. We are next door neighbors to Bayada Home Health Care. And during COVID, when all the theater world shut down, Mark and Ann Bayada said, hey, if you want to keep doing your shows in our parking lot so you don't have to shut down, we'll let you do that, and didn't charge us anything. And we did 19 live musicals during COVID outside in the Bayada parking lot. And so that kind of collaboration I thought was the epitome of what the award description said. So I submitted us, and your powers that be thought it was worthy.
No, it was an excellent example of, a for-profit business wanting to help, wanting to collaborate, and the not-for-profit entity appreciating that and taking full advantage of it to the point where, as Mark said, there were 19 different performances. So we need people. Ideally, all of you would be on one standing committee. And ideally, we would recruit people who are not on the board to be parts of those committees if they wish to. Ideally, you would all be a part of one ad hoc committee. So summit, the needs assessment, part of the summit, the awards dinner, and the education and technical assistance committee, which is responsible for the workshops and all of that stuff. There may be other ad hoc committees that we need to identify and, you know, populate, but those are the ones that are out there waiting to be populated. So why don't we? Oh, the other thing I should mention is that we recognize that we have done a poor job of introducing NPDC across the region. The mini summits helped us do that, helped us take a step in that direction. But we realized that having somebody on the ground in each of those counties who was helping us with things like, so Jewel, this would be part of the answer to your question. Jim Curtin's going to be our ambassador or on the ground eyes and ears in Cape May County. That makes sense for him because he is a big deal at Ascenda, and that's an important county for them. So one of the things we will ask him to do is not only talk to all the people who came to our mini summit there, but to find other ways. We collaborated, for example, with the County Commission on Women to do our mini summit there. So I would envision Jim going to those folks and saying, we now have this database. We need to get the word out so that people who aren't in it can sign up, and the people who are in it go in and check and make sure that we're up to date. So we will have one ambassador for each county. I think we're covered except for Gloucester County, which is kind of amazing because we have a substantial presence there. And Nate, in addition to what he's going to do in terms of our needs assessment, is going to function as the Camden County person. So that's a big step forward for us there. All right, let's stop again. If you got questions, let's ask them. I don't know that I'll answer them, but let's ask them. Either you're all asleep or I'm doing a really good job of explaining all this. Okay. The most important thing we can do, and I think Gabby used the word clarity, and so did Julie, and I think Nicole did as well. What do we expect? This is an all-volunteer organization with the exception of one part-time paid employee. That means that we expect that the people on the board will do something. What you do is entirely up to you. We have expectations in terms of the traditional trilogy that, you know, not-for-profits point to. So there's time, talent, and treasure. So if we had an accountant on the board, we do. That would be a perfect person to have volunteer to be in the treasurer slot. That worked. So that's talent. Time, you all are giving us your time right now, and I hope you give us more in trying to elaborate upon what we're doing, make it better, think of new things we should be doing that we're not. And I think the thing that worries people who join NPO boards, I counted up, this is the 23rd NPO board I've served on in my life. And everybody says, how much? And people are surprised when they hear what it costs to be on the board of the Philadelphia Orchestra or whatever. I don't think it costs anything to be on the board of the Morristown Theater Company, or if it does, I missed that when we were having our retreat. So we don't have a minimum. We also don't have an up-to-date strategic plan. Our last real strategic plan was dated in 2017. We have had attempts to do it since then. And the most recent one was in the last administration of this organization. And the attendance at that meeting did not generate content that basically changed anything. So what we said about money last time we talked about it was there's no minimum. We expect every board member to personally contribute something. We don't care if it's $10 or whatever. We want to be able to say on every grant application, 100% of our board members give. We're not going to say Mike Willman only gave $1 and Mark Morgan gave $1 million. The other thing is that we want to be actively seeking introductions to people who might appreciate what we do and might be willing to support it. So we set a mark of $1,000. So I'll stick with Mark. Mark, you guys don't have a lot of money. You have generously supported us. I want to make that clear. But let's pretend you weren't in a position to do that. You're barely hanging on. But you know people. In the years that you've won all those awards, you've met a lot of people like the Baitas. So to introduce us to somebody, and we're looking basically to be put on the path to getting a relationship that might ultimately be productive in terms of money. And we're hoping that that is sort of at the $1,000 level annually. If you need a target, nobody calls you up and says, Greg, you better send me some TD money because you're not at the $1,000 level yet. But the idea is that we want you to know that we need to be introduced. We have lots and lots of board members, and every board I've ever served on has lots of members. I want to help, but I don't want to fundraise. You know, I'm not comfortable with that. I want to go to my friends and ask for money. I would understand that if we were a for-profit organization. We're not. So my hope is that people who are on this board would feel sufficiently positive about what we're doing that they would not be reluctant to tell that story to somebody. But we don't ask you to do that. All we ask you is to say, would you be willing to have a cup of coffee with somebody from our board who would tell you about what we do? And if that makes sense to you, if it resonates in a way that, you know, makes you want to know more, perhaps even get involved, great. So that's what we ask of everybody. Point us some way. We could do a much better job of that. We did an adequate job of grant writing and fundraising for the summit. We could do much better. So those are group initiatives. But I don't want to, you know, give away the store, but you all are smart people. If Greg Carlisle and Rob Curley and Gabriela Santaferrero were not on our side when we sent in an application to TD Bank, we'd just be in line. And they might say that's really good. And there are a lot of things, you know, everybody that we're competing with is on the side of the Angels. If we didn't know the Holman folks, if Mindy Holman didn't like us, you know, there'd be lots of reasons for them to give their money elsewhere. And they give money to everybody. I mean, they are so generous. So just another example, a small example, Bill Whelan from Ocean First joins our board. And we have this conversation and he says, just send in this thing. No, this is not the foundation. This is just the bank. And, you know, I'll see that you get something. So something turns out to be, you know, better than nothing. It didn't change the, you know, landscape for world peace or anything, but that's what we need. We need people who, and I think all of you fall into this category. You are sophisticated. You move in these circles. You know how these things work. So all we want is kind of having your active help in the fundraising process. We are, as an organization, we suck at fundraising. That's a technical term, but it's true. We have people on our board who can raise money. But in terms of making the case for the organization, and we appreciate that we have a challenge. We don't save babies. We don't feed starving people. We don't put people in shelters who otherwise would be homeless on a, you know, freezing night in February. What we do is help all those people who do that. And that is a less direct and less impactful story than holding, you know, a 10-month-old child in your arms and saying, this is little Mark Morgan, and little Mark Morgan might not be with us if we hadn't had the benefit of your generosity in terms of helping us to help Mark. So that's where we are. We are at 1 hour. What I would like to do is, first of all, deal with any comments or questions or suggestions, but have a second session. We have decided, so I think most of you know this, we had been doing monthly board meetings for the longest time. We've gone to quarterly. So the next board meeting would normally be the first Friday in July. That would conflict with the July 4th holiday plans of a lot of people. So it'll probably be the second Friday. And the second Friday in July is the 12th. So if you, and it's typically at 9 o'clock on a Friday, we have returned to in-person board meetings, but we recognize that that might not be possible for some people based on whatever their professional commitments are on a given day. So we will always try to have a Zoom capability for somebody, but really, we all know that it's better to look across the table and say, Gabby, you know, can you do this, than to say it online. In between, on a schedule that will basically be the first Friday of the month, but can be anytime. We've authorized the executive committee to take any action that seems to be needed. That executive committee is the officers and the chair of the governance committee. The chair of the governance committee, that position is open at the moment, but we do have a full slate of officers. So that's where we stand in terms of what's coming up. That's where we stand in terms of money. That's where we stand in terms of programs. I'm sure that I've missed a lot of things. So why don't you tell me what I missed, and I'll try to cover it next time, or if I can, I'll just respond right now. And I think the next time we may invite those ambassadors to join us too, just so they kind of get up to speed on what we're doing. One of the hopes is that some of those folks will enjoy their association with us and what we're asking them to do, and ultimately possibly be board members. So I'll just run down the list as it appears on my participant list. And again, thank you all for doing this. Gabby, you got any stuff that we didn't cover, or suggestions you want to make, or whatever?
No, Mike, I actually really appreciate the time that you took to explain this. It was needed on my part, but I think that I may have some questions like later on, and I can definitely reach out if they come to mind.
What that means is Gabby's going to go to Greg and say, Greg, get me the hell out of here. On some other board. Greg, I know that you've had a lot of things on your mind today, which, I hope all turn out well. Is there anything in particular for the time you have been able to sort of focus on what we're doing that you think we have missed, or something you want to put on the table?
No, I mean, I'm sorry I was in and out. It's been an interesting 72 hours, I guess, this week for TD Bank. So, but all is well. We want to make sure that everyone's understanding that we're good. Everything's safe, but just going through some bad headlines, unfortunately. No, so what I paid attention to, I thought it was good. It's a good starting point. I think this is probably good for any new board member. I think what you put in writing was very good. I did get a chance to scroll through it, believe it or not, while I was sort of multitasking, listening to this meeting and the calls I was on. No, but I think it's a good foundation to get started. And I think what it's going to end up happening is we'll end up having more, questions that arise, I think, through, just normal conversation, and people can have that document to refer to. I personally put it on my desktop. So, every time I'm getting ready for something and doing the meeting, or doing a meeting or an event, like, I can refer back to it, obviously. But I think framing out the mission of what we do was helpful for me. I think the expectations of raising money or making introductions to raise money, I think that's a given. I think, just people in certain jobs, like obviously we, I'll use Gabby and I, we got to be careful on how we go about asking for donations because we're in banking and that could be looked at very, interestingly if you ask for a donation, especially from a customer, because that could be considered pay to play. However, what you can do is say like, hey, it's a great organization, does a lot of good for the community. Take a look at what they do, consider supporting. Like we just have to, be careful on how we go about things, but every industry is the same. I think that I think it goes without saying every board this is probably my 20th board that I've served on. I heard your resume about how many you've served on through the years. But yeah, it's an expectation that you help bring awareness and raise money. It's one of the biggest things that you can do on a board. So I think setting that expectation right out of the gates is helpful. But no, I think you covered at least what I had hoped. I mean, I still don't know what I don't know, but that'll come with time, but it gives me a framework. So sorry, that was a long-winded answer. But for me, it was helpful.
No, I always appreciate people, especially when I'm in a classroom setting, which I'm not comparing to this, when students I'm allegedly teaching understand that there's this amazing amount that we know so little, and even the things that we know are predicated. When I went to school, the textbook said that Columbus discovered America. That's what we knew. And now we know, although we weren't there, I'm old, but not old enough to have been there, that is not the case. So conventional wisdom and all of that. Yeah, I appreciate it. Jewel, thoughts?
Hi, thanks so much for having this. As a new board member, I feel like I've been navigating in the dark for a little bit, so I think this offered some clarity, so I appreciate that. One thing I did want for you to think about too, in terms of how we can help support Nicole's role. So understanding what her job responsibilities are in terms of, if I have someone I want to connect to, is it her job to meet with them, or is it considered part of the board's responsibility? So just understanding, the one paid position from this organization and how we can help support her would be beneficial.
Part-time paid position.
Right, part-time.
So that's actually something that the executive committee will be looking at in the next 60 days. Okay. That whole issue. Okay, who am I up to? I did. Mark Morgan, did I ask you? I'm looking at my list and it's rotating. So anything you want to throw out here as we wind up?
I'm thankful to have been asked to serve with all these esteemed fellow trustees here or board members, and will help in any way I can. But this was very helpful to hear more about what is expected of board members.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mark Serace.
Mike, I'm good on my end. Just appreciate the call today, and it's nice to learn a little bit more about the role here. So, thank you.
All right, and you all should know that in his previous position with Republic, one of Mark's responsibilities was to, and I'm sure this is not the right language, but to kind of be in charge of the bank's NPO portfolio. So we were especially happy when people at Republic suggested that he be part of, our Republic legacy tradition. I don't know how we're going to replace the money we used to get from Republic. That's another thing. But anyway, where am I? Mary Ann.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. And I think pretty much everything has been said that I wanted to say myself, but I just thank you, Mike, for today's meeting and the clarity. I know I'm probably going to have some questions moving forward, but when I do, I'll reach out, just kind of soaking it all in right now. But I do appreciate this time very much. So thank you.
If you have questions, call Greg Carlisle. I don't have any answers. Nate.
Yes, so definitely happy to be here. This is not my first rodeo, so I've done a lot of board service, in Texas, not here in New Jersey. But what I would say though is I think we do need to think seriously about getting a strategic plan in place. So I definitely would like to have more conversations about that. Whether we do that in-house or use somebody externally, we definitely need to be operating with some plan that really kind of outlines growth. And I also like the fact that Julie brought up, I'm also concerned about, I want to learn more about what Nicole does as well in terms of, I mean, I know she's part-time, but I'm always big on looking at ways that we can increase human capital. And so definitely looking at what that looks like over the next few years. I think this is a very important organization that can definitely be a great resource to nonprofits throughout South Jersey. So looking at how we can best support Nicole and her role. I definitely want to have that conversation too as well as I'm on the board. And in terms of fundraising, I've done a lot of fundraising too as well. My past board experiences, and so again, really, I would say, like, though we may not have like that, you know, tear-jerking story, there's a way that we can do it. I definitely think that we are a great resource like nonprofits, and there are a lot of foundations who are concerned with kind of like the capacity and whether or not nonprofits have the technical expertise, to carry out their mission. And I kind of see us as providing that resource to them. And so there are ways you can message this and shape this, but definitely I'm looking forward to having these conversations throughout the year, and of course as I serve on this board. So thank you for the time, Mike.
Sure. One thing I didn't mention, but seeing you on the screen made me think of it. We are trying to identify, to recruit, if you will, people to be in charge of these NTE subject matter buckets. So Nate's colleague at Rutgers, the woman whose last name I can't pronounce, Mavis, who is the executive director of the Rand Institute, has graciously agreed to head up the transportation subject matter bucket. Jeff Swartz, who is the executive director of the Camden County Workforce Development Board, has agreed to do it for employment. Jim Curtin from Ascenda has agreed to do it for mental health and substance use. But we have another 15 buckets. So if you know somebody who is really, whose passion is animal rights, or I don't want to make arts and culture a bucket. It has a lot of buckets within it. We need to identify those people, and then we want to have those people have the benefit of Nate's stewardship in terms of how we go forward with that. So we're looking to start that process and have those people identified by the middle of June. We won't have them all, but we'll have some, and we will get going with the ones we have. All right, so Nicole, a number of people have expressed an interest in clarifying what we expect of you and how we can help you. So you get the last word.
Whoa, I feel honored. Mike gives me the last word. Thank you.
All of you
Thank you.
close your ears. I have something to say to Nicole. I don't want you to hear it.
No, that's great. Everything that was presented today is needed and necessary. I really believe in this organization. And I was telling Mike the other day that I've been having little offshoot meetings with people that want to join and that want to be a part of nonprofit. They're starting their nonprofits. They want some type of guidance, or they've been doing it for a while. So I've been having little offshoot meetings just to get them some literature, like our PowerPoints, some of the Zoom calls for our classes and educational classes. I'm looking forward to the development portion of this. I want to revamp some of those classes that we're holding and we're doing, because some of them may not be relevant for the upcoming fall season. And the piece on cyber is really that's starting to trend. People, they want cyber security insurance for their nonprofits. That's really starting a trend. I'm hearing a lot about that. So I'm just excited. Thank you. Let's get some volunteers in here. Let's get some staff members in here. This is a great resource for the South Jersey nonprofits, and we've only scratched the surface. So thank you all so much. It was a great meeting, Mike. You put everything together pretty well. And in the next month or two, you're going to see more emails coming from me at Nicole@NPDCSNJ.org. I'm transitioning out of the info. So that's where you'll see a lot of the information come, and a lot of the documents. Michelle and I are working diligently to get everything up on a Google Drive. So a lot of this information that Mike has we're putting it so we can streamline it so everyone can have it. And all you'll do is go up on that Google Drive, you'll see it. We'll never have to search and dig for documentation again. So we're working structurally in that manner. So I'm excited. Thank you all.
Good. This is not meant to take the last word status away from Nicole, but if you know people that you think we should talk to about possibly working with the board, either as a future board member or in some other volunteer capacity, we'd love to talk to them. If somebody has an interest in anything that we do, we certainly have a way to take advantage of that interest. So do this for me, please. Think about what we talked about today. And if you have general thoughts, if you have directions, for example, you think we haven't even explored going, but we should, or if you have specific suggestions, whatever it may be, just drop me a note and we will make sure that that's part of the agenda for the second and hopefully last of the onboarding sessions. My thanks for all of you being here. I will send you, and the people who weren't here, I'll send you the link for the recording once I get it downloaded. But have a great weekend. Thank you for agreeing to help NPDC. You are a talented group. If we can find a way to use all of your talents, we'll be great. We'll see you.
Take care and have a great weekend.